This is a continuation of chapter 15. This is part 2 for monopolistic competition, which is the third market structure I've looked at. So now we're going to distinguish a little bit between a perfectly competitive firm and monopolistically competitive firm. So in the long run, we know neither can have an economic profit that's above average. Since there are no barriers to entry, new firms will enter and drive down the price until there is a normal profit. But the difference is when they're at that long run situation, the perfectly competitive firms produce at a minimum average total cost. So if you think about that, what we did before, we have the firm as a price taker, so you demand marginal revenue curve, the marginal cost curve, and it's PSG equal ATC. So at that quantity where MR equals MC, it's also the point where the ATC curve is minimum, and that's said to be the efficient scale. The monopolistic competitive firms, however, do not produce at the minimum ATC. They are actually producing a quantity that is less than, that is below the quantity which ATC is minimum. Since they're producing below that point, they're said to have excess capacity. Excess capacity because they're stopping earlier. If they kept producing, as we'll see, their ATC costs would still decline, but then they'd be moving away from their quantity where they maximize their profit. So looking at this graph below, so this obviously is, looking at this, you would just think it is perhaps monopoly with a normal profit because demand is tangent to ATC, but once again for monopoly, we would think that would be unusual. So this best describes a long-run monopolistic competitive firm. So we have P equals ATC at this point, and of course MR is equal to MC here. So this quantity of 75 is a quantity for the monopolistically competitive firm. Do you notice the minimum ATC point is at this quantity of 100? So the monopolistically competitive firm is producing at 75. That value is below the efficient scale quantity where the ATC curve is minimum, right? Efficient scale, ATC has to be minimum. So therefore they're said to have excess capacity. And they have excess capacity of 25 genes per day because they're looking at 100 is the efficient scale, and then they're at 75. So if they produce 25 more goods, notice the ATC curve would decline. And as mentioned, the efficient scale is 100 because that is at the minimum ATC curve, which of course is where ATC curve intersects the marginal cost curve. Concept not too important here in economics, more on the marketing side. It's a concept called the markup. It's when the firm has a price higher than its marginal cost curve. So where they're producing at 75 goods, you can notice that $25 is the price that the firm charges. Their marginal cost is $10, so they have a markup of 15. But back to a concept that we did a lot on before, deadweight loss. So at a quantity of 75, there's going to be a deadweight loss due to underproduction. If this was perfectly competitive, we know they'd be producing where supply or marginal cost equals demand. So if we look at where supply is equal to demand, it's at this point right here. So therefore all these goods between 75 and that point that I'm now shading in blue, which is what shaded in before, that is deadweight loss due to underproduction. Okay, this practice problem, you should work this problem out. The answers, this is from the textbook. The answers are in the textbook itself at the bottom of the page, so you should work this out. You should be able to do that. Please come to extra help if you're not sure. Okay, it's the last section in chapter 15. I'm just going to look at briefly, it's more about marketing, not as important for us in economics. So of course, since there are no barriers to entry, both competitive firm and also monopolistically competitive firms, they need to keep developing new products and need to innovate, because of course other companies are looking out there to take some of their market share away if they don't innovate and produce a better product. And here these firms, there are small differences in for the product that they produce. If you remember, we mentioned that these firms have good but not perfect substitutes. So therefore, when the products are only a little bit different from each other, it's actually more important to advertise, because you have to convince the consumer to come to your store since your product is slightly different than someone else's. So of course, if your company advertise, their costs go up, and if their costs go up, their average total cost also increases. So the question is, if a firm does an advertising campaign where their costs go up, how could advertising actually lower the average total cost? So if you look at the graph at the bottom here, the curve on the bottom represents the company's, let's say, their average total cost curve prior to any advertising. If they have an advertising campaign, so then we have a higher average total cost. So this top one is average total cost with advertising. So if the firm produced 25 goods, they would have an average total cost of 60. If we look at the new curve, we extended it, then of course if they sold 25 goods, they would have a much higher ATC. Well, the reason the question, how could advertising be lower if it's an advertising campaign? Well, the goal of advertising is to increase demand. So let's just say that due to increasing the advertising budget, you had 4 times as many customers, from 25 to 100, buy the jeans. That'd be actually a very, very successful advertising campaign. If that's the case, we now go from 100, we go to the new advertising cost curve, and you can see that the average total cost is 40, which is lower than the initial value of 60. So if costs go up, but if you can sell so many more, your average total cost can actually decline after that campaign. Okay, this problem is an old AP question. You need to be able to draw this one out and work it out and check your answers. And so too with this question. As you can see, it has also some review topics. You should work it out. To these, follow the notes. So make sure you have a very good understanding of this. I will be starting chapter 16 when we return from Thanksgiving. Hope you all have a good break.